She stood at the threshold of our lake cabin like she owned it, which, legally, she did not. The morning sun caught the little flecks of gold in her sunglasses as she rolled her navy Samsonite suitcase over the cedar decking, the same deck I'd spent last summer staining while she networked in Denver for 4 straight weekends. "My work husband is taking me on the bonus trip I earned," she said, with that smug, lemon-sucked smirk she reserves for maximum damage. "Try not to break anything while I'm gone." I was crouched with sandpaper in my hand, smoothing down a warped porch step for the 3rd time that month. I didn't look up right away, just kept sanding until the grain felt right. Then I straightened up, cracked my back, and gave her a small nod. "Okay," I said. "Be safe." That was it. No yelling. No begging. No teary, "Why are you doing this?" crap. She was expecting more. She lingered for a beat, hoping to draw some blood, maybe spark a jealous plea. But when she realized I wasn't biting, she laughed under her breath and walked off, heels tapping against wood like the end of a chapter. What she didn't see, what she couldn't see, was me walking inside 10 minutes later, into the study she always called his little cave, where her voice never softened and her presence always tightened the air. I opened the second drawer from the bottom. Tucked underneath a box of replacement fuses and a wrapped cigar from my father's funeral was a sealed envelope marked "Private, 2007, written in my own hand. I hadn't touched it in 16 years. When I broke the seal, the paper inside had a faint smell of damp oak and thyme. It was a trigger agreement. Legal, notarized. A document tied to an ethics clause buried inside an old corporate agreement she never once asked about. Why would she? She thought the old firm had dissolved. In her world, anything that didn't trend on LinkedIn no longer existed. But it existed, just quietly. There's a line in the document, halfway down. Triggering behavior includes public actions resulting in reputational damage to affiliated firms or partner associates. Then a handwritten note in the margin, initialed by her original CEO, exception granted for legacy silent equity holders. Guess who held the silent equity? She used to joke that I was more of a porch dog than a partner. Said I didn't have the killer instinct, that I was too content with fixing toilets and routing bathroom tiles, that I was lucky she dragged me into the social world. She had no idea I'd bankrolled her first firm under an alias, through a shell company called M. Fraser Holdings. No idea I still had a 3.5% voting claim on any reputational breaches via ethics trigger buried deep in the original agreement Schedule C. She never asked where the money came from, or who signed her first office lease. She just assumed she deserved it. Like the cabin, like the car she drove to the airport. She never earned that bonus trip. I did. She just cashed in the interest on loyalty. By the time her Uber left the gravel path, she was already posting from the gate, champagne in hand, Cole beside her with his stupid hipster fedora, both of them beaming like they'd discovered joy itself in a Delta lounge. 24 years together. 2 mortgages. 1 child, grown and gone. And this was her parting gift, mockery disguised as empowerment. She wasn't just going on a trip. She was pulling the pin on a grenade she didn't even know she was holding. And look, if you're still here, reading this, I'll ask for one thing I never asked for. Hit subscribe. Over 90% of folks never do, but it helps the team bring more of these stories to life. And sometimes, truth needs a better microphone. Now, I didn't follow her. Didn't call. Didn't track her phone or check her receipts. That's not my style. My style was built in 2007, buried in signatures and clause codes, and activated only when a certain line was crossed. And she didn't just cross it. She marched over it in stilettos, humming like she was the main act in her own little Broadway production. By the time her plane touched down, and she ordered room service for 2, I was already driving to a small office park on the edge of town, where an old LLC still held a live compliance key. The clerk behind the counter looked at the envelope, typed something into her terminal, then looked up at me. "It's still active," she said, tapping the screen. "Do you want to trigger the review?" I didn't answer right away. I just thought about that porch step, and the look on her face when she said, "Earned." Then I said, "Yes. Today." She was in the air for maybe 3 hours before the first photo went up, 2 flutes of champagne in a Delta One seat, toes pointed toward a bulkhead, captioned, "Success tastes like 30,000 feet and 0 apologies." The second came an hour after they landed. Cole's arm draped around her shoulder at the resort check-in, both of them glowing under the kind of golden hour light influencers chase across the globe. Her expression? Triumph masquerading as serenity. Like the whole trip was a TED Talk on female empowerment. The caption, Earned every minute. I'd seen that look before. She wore it at our son's graduation when she bragged to the dean about mentoring lesser women. She wore it at our anniversary dinner last year when she toasted herself. Now, she wore it like armor, blissfully unaware that the blade was already at her back. I wasn't watching the photos in real time. I wasn't scrolling or screenshotting like some bitter ex. I had work to do. Real work. The kind that didn't post well, but changed everything. While she ordered her first mojito, I parked my truck in front of a squat brick building on the edge of town. No signage, just a blue door and a buzzer. The kind of place that didn't need a street presence because it hadn't served walk-ins in over a decade. Inside, the air smelled like toner and old carpet glue. A young woman in a ponytail and a faded State College sweatshirt greeted me like I was ordering a coffee. "You're here for compliance review?" I slid the envelope across the counter. This was sealed in 2007. M. Fraser Holdings. Silent equity clause trigger. She squinted at the handwriting. Then her eyes flicked up to me. "You're the principal?" I nodded. She opened the envelope carefully, like it might disintegrate. When she read the first page, her brow furrowed. By the second page, she was biting her lip. "You're ready to execute this?" she asked, looking up with the kind of hesitance usually reserved for bomb techs. "Today," I said. She didn't ask why. These people never do. The old agreements either die in the back of a file drawer, or they come alive with surgical precision. No middle ground. Meanwhile, in the land of sea breezes and ocean views, she posted a boomerang of her and coal-clinking glasses over charred octopus. The menu behind them had one word in gold: elite. Her caption: "Hard work deserves hard play." No tags, no ring, just her glowing skin, his smug face, and a sense of invincibility that's always loudest right before the fall. I didn't smile, didn't rage, just handed the compliance officer the additional documents: emails, original equity certificate, proof of active registration, trigger log. By sunset, she was posting poolside candidates. Not answering emails all week. Don't even try. Cole's hand was visible in the background, half buried in a towel, thumb tracing the rim of her glass. A high school classmate liked the photo. Her spin instructor commented, "Get it, queen." What no one saw was that back home, a small digital flag had just been raised inside a server linked to her firm's internal compliance system. A submission marked Founder Ethics Trigger, Schedule C. Attached, time-stamped proof of reputational exposure, misuse of company funds for unauthorized personal gain, and evidence of undisclosed relationship with a subordinate. The fuse had been lit. But to her, it was still all just golden light and curated playlists. I know that feeling. When you think you've outrun the consequences because the sky is clear and the Wi-Fi is strong. When you confuse attention for immunity. She thought she'd traded up. That this little vacation was a reward. She had no idea it was an autopsy in progress. And the body was her career. Monday morning, 8:12 a.m. Somewhere on the 33rd floor of a corporate glass tower, a compliance analyst named Jenna, 2 years into the job, one chipped thumbnail and 3 cold sips into her burn Americano, clicked open what she thought would be a routine quarterly review queue. Nothing glamorous. Just spreadsheets, flagged expense reports, and the usual excuses from mid-tier execs about why that $1,200 dinner included clients. But then her cursor hovered over an alert she hadn't seen before. Schedule C Ethics Trigger, Manual Submission Legacy Agreement Reference ID, MFH, 2007. She clicked. First attachment, a scanned document stamped with a compliance seal older than she was. The kind of legalese relic that gets handed down between boards like folklore. Second attachment, a trip itinerary with her firm's header. Flight, resort, dates. Third, screenshots. Dozens. Instagram posts. Room service orders. Photos of Cole and Meredith. Her name on every reservation. Labeled as work husband in captions. Champagne charges billed under client entertainment. Except there were no clients. Just candlelight and a corner suite with a private plunge pool. And then came the fourth attachment. That was the kill shot. It was a line item from the expense report. Not just the room, but shared accommodations, upgraded package, add-on, romance suite. Bolded. Billed directly under Executive Retreat Initiative. Jenna blinked. She reached for her headphones, pulled them off. Her stomach tightened. By 8:23 a.m., the email had been escalated to legal. By 8:41 a.m., it was sitting in the inbox of the firm's chief ethics officer. By 9:15 a.m., the head of HR was forwarded the file with a 3-word subject line: immediate board review. At 9:48 a.m., A meeting was quietly scheduled on the executive calendar. Ethics and reputational risk, emergency session. No one mentioned her name aloud, but in the system, her profile was tagged. Status, under ethics committee review. The office buzzed on, oblivious. The assistant managing coffee orders for a client meeting down the hall, someone microwaving fish again on 31, IT issuing lanyards to new interns. No one knew the storm rolling and had a beach umbrella and a fedora. Back in the resort, she was reclining poolside with a mimosa in hand, snapping a photo of her pedicure over the water with the caption, "Manifesting Mondays." Cole was laughing off camera, probably suggesting a second route. Her phone buzzed once, calendar notification. She swiped it away. And while she added another sun-drenched boomerang to her story, an entire department on the other coast began assembling a timeline of misconduct. It wasn't about the trip itself. People travel. Executives schmooze. It was the lie of it. The billing. The lack of disclosure. The cocky assumption that the world would never look closer, that she was somehow immune to the same clause she helped draft into policy for others. She had crossed from exemplary performance to flagged risk in less than an hour. Her file, which once contained nothing more than glowing quarterly metrics and stock option charts, was now growing a new tab, ethics investigation, confidential, restricted access. And the worst part? The trigger came from inside. A shareholder clause buried so deep even the board had to call legal for context. The same legal team that now had her name in bold, right beside the words Clause 9C, violation under review. From her lounge chair, she was curating perfection. In the boardroom, they were assembling a case. The morning after the trigger submission, I returned to the one room in the house she never bothered to enter. My office. She used to call it the museum, a dismissive joke about how nothing in it ever changed. The same desk, same leather chair, same mechanical pencil sharpener that my grandfather gave me when I started college. But that was the point. It was my space, my quiet, my control. She didn't know that locked inside the old roll-top filing cabinet, beneath folders labeled with names she'd forgotten, was the one document that still made me indispensable. I slid the drawer open and found the original equity agreement from 2007, still in its hard plastic sleeve. Crisp, untouched. The ink on the signature lines had faded just enough to look antique, but not unreadable. I remembered that day like a cracked vinyl record, warm, imperfect, real. Her boss, Adrian, had been my roommate in college. Arrogant, but charismatic. The kind of guy who made you want to believe in him, even when you knew better. When he pitched the startup back then, he had two things, an idea and a logo. No funding, no runway, just pure salesmanship. I wasn't a big player then, but I had liquidity. More importantly, I had motive. Meredith had been floundering in mid-level roles for years. Adrian said he could make her a founding executive if I backed the launch, anonymously. She'd never know. He even sold it like a gift. She'll feel like she earned it herself. I should have laughed. I didn't. I wired the money through a Delaware-registered LLC I controlled called M. Fraser Holdings. No fanfare. No board seats. Just a silent equity position. 3.5%. Enough to matter. Not enough to draw questions. I never told her. Not because I wanted to trap her, but because I wanted her to grow without needing me. I thought maybe if she believed it was all her, she'd finally drop the claws, stop clawing for validation in every room. I thought maybe she'd soften. She didn't. Instead, she built a career on top of it and used every rung of the ladder like a dagger. She sneered at the idea of domesticity, rolled her eyes at couples who shared calendars, mocked men who still fixed their own gutters. She didn't want a partner. She wanted an audience. And buried on page 12 of that agreement, Clause 9C, was the one fuse she could never see coming. Any public misconduct by a founding executive resulting in reputational damage may trigger immediate executive review if activated by a qualified equity stakeholder. It had never been used. Most people forgot it existed. But the clause was real. It had teeth. Because back then, Adrian had been terrified of optics. The company was young. One scandal could have ended it. So he'd agreed to it, thinking no one would ever pull it. Until now. I pulled out a second envelope, one that I'd sealed 2 years ago, after she canceled our anniversary dinner to fly to Vancouver for strategy sessions with Cole. That envelope held copies. Dated. Witnessed. A complete dossier. Investment proof. Beneficiary ledger. Trigger instructions. All I had to do was deliver it. I didn't relish it. This wasn't revenge show or social media sabotage. I wasn't setting fire to her life out of jealousy. This was surgical. Precise. Triggering the clause didn't guarantee termination. It didn't even guarantee an investigation. All it did was force a vote, an emergency review by the board to determine whether her behavior had compromised the firm's ethical integrity. But given the photos, the billing records, the captions she'd lovingly posted, it would be enough. The brilliance of it wasn't in the punishment, it was in the paperwork. She'd walked into her own trap with her chin high and hashtags blazing. She'd built her entire public persona on being untouchable, professional, ascendant. And now, the very architecture she stood on was starting to creak. I took the agreement, scanned it into the archive, and uploaded a copy to the internal shareholder portal the firm had foolishly left active. As I clicked submit, I paused for a moment, staring at the old college email I hadn't seen in years. Adrian's, still tied to the original contract. For a second, I considered adding a note. Instead, I closed the laptop. Let the clause speak for itself. Tuesday morning, 9:04 a.m. She was brushing sea salt from her curls when the resort Wi-Fi flickered and a notification popped up on her phone. Video call scheduled. Compliance inquiry. She rolled her eyes, tapped into the meeting link from the patio chaise. Didn't even bother to put on a blazer, just draped a silk cover-up over her swimsuit and added gold hoops. Her version of corporate casual. The call opened on a soft blue interface. Three faces. Legal counsel from HQ, the head of HR, and Adrian, the CEO, her old friend, her gateway to everything. His expression was unreadable, but his camera was definitely on. So was his intent. She smiled like she was checking into a five-star lounge. Morning, team. If this is about the Q3 projections, I sent revisions Sunday night, before I went off-grid. They didn't return the smile. The general counsel, a woman named Marla who always struck Meredith as mildly underdressed and socially invisible, cleared her throat first. We won't take much of your time. There's been concern about the nature of your recent trip. Meredith let out a light, controlled laugh. The nature of the trip? It's a bonus. I hit every metric. Exceeded projections by 14%. The board was briefed last month. Adrian said nothing, just adjusted his glasses. Marla continued. Yes, your performance this quarter is noted. This concern relates to ethics compliance. Specifically, recent billing records submitted for executive reimbursement. A pause. Not long. Just enough to signal a shift. Why was your guest not your spouse? Meredith blinked. She shifted in her chair, but recovered fast. Excuse me. On the expense submission, Marla said, tapping something unseen. Your guest's name was listed as Cole B. But your spouse of record is. Is that a requirement now? Meredith cut in, voice higher than usual. Are we monitoring marital attendance for retreats? The head of HR spoke for the first time. Calm. Detached. Only when those retreats are charged under company initiatives. And only when the accommodations fall under the clause for approved guest expenditures. Another pause. Marla added. Specifically, the suite upgrade, room service labeled as romantic dining experience, and the resort spa package for two, billed directly to your corporate card. These are outside compliance parameters unless disclosed and pre-approved. Meredith's smirk faltered. Just briefly. It was harmless. A reward. There's no impropriety here. The board has approved similar retreats before. Were they with subordinates? HR asked. No expression. No judgment. Just fact-finding. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Adrian finally leaned forward. His voice was neutral. Not cold. Not warm. Meredith, we're not making conclusions today. We're initiating standard review. You'll receive follow-up documentation this week. She recovered quickly. Smiled again, teeth just slightly tighter. Of course. Happy to clarify anything in writing. Marla nodded. That won't be necessary at this point. Thank you for your time. The screen went black. Meredith sat there, fingers still poised above her keyboard, eyes unfocused. She stared at the faint outline of her own reflection in the glossy screen. For the first time, she wasn't sure what to post. She checked her phone. Cole was out at the gym. She pulled up her photos, started drafting another story caption. Something breezy, something disarming. But the words didn't come. She scrolled to the resort receipt, opened it, stared at the line, Lover's Escape Package add-on. For a brief moment, a pulse of unease surfaced, like cold water down her spine. She shook it off, told herself they were bluffing, posturing. They wouldn't risk making a public example out of someone with her portfolio. Not when Q4 was still in play. Not when clients tied to her name were still locked in multi-year renewals. Still, she turned off the location tag in her Instagram settings before uploading her next story. Just in case. Tuesday, 4:22 p.m. East Coast time. The executive board calendar updated with a single, ominous entry. Emergency ethics session, closed review. No dial-in link. No agenda notes. Just a hard block on everyone's calendar with mandatory attendance in bold. Meredith didn't see it. She was still poolside, scrolling through tagged photos and crafting a cheeky caption about corporate wellness, when her phone buzzed. Not with another DM, but a call. Caller ID, Adrian. She tapped it lazily, expecting a soft apology for the earlier overreach. Hey, she purred, if this is about. Who the hell is M. Fraser Holdings? Adrian's voice sliced through the speaker like a wire snapping under pressure. Her breath hitched. Not fear. Not yet. Just confusion. What? M. Fraser Holdings. He repeated, more deliberate now. A dormant LLC that just invoked Clause 9C from the original founding agreement. The clause tied to silent equity review. There was a silence, broken only by the muffled clink of ice in her glass. That's my husband's, she said slowly. His trust. There was a pause on his end now, the kind that thickens the air like smoke. You brought this in-house. Adrian hissed. You didn't disclose it? I didn't think, she started. You didn't think? His voice exploded again, this time audible even to the couple sunbathing 3 loungers away. Meredith, that clause is a reputational kill switch. You triggered it yourself with those damn posts. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She had known about M. Fraser Holdings in passing. Something he used for passive stuff, she once called it. A shelf company, a tax tool, a retirement funnel. She had never once connected it to the early funding of Adrian's company. Never once asked where the original startup capital came from when her name magically landed on the executive slate. He had given her that seat. She never bothered to ask what it cost. Why would he still have access to anything? She mumbled, less to Adrian and more to herself. The firm's structure changed. Not entirely, Adrian snapped. Schedule C survived the merger. Legacy protections. Christ, legal just found the clause buried under 2 reorganizations. It's still binding. And now we're exposed. Wait, exposed how? I didn't. There was no misconduct. You billed a lover's suite as executive development, Meredith. You used a corporate card for spa treatments and rose petals. You brought in a subordinate, not your spouse, and then blasted it all over public platforms tied to our firm's taglines. And now, your own husband, your silent equity, holding husband, just dropped a compliance hammer on us with timestamps and legal teeth we can't ignore. She stood up suddenly, nearly knocking over her drink. Her hands were trembling. You don't understand, she whispered. This wasn't some vendetta. He's never even said anything. That's the point, Adrian barked. He didn't need to say anything. He wrote it 16 years ago. And now? He's done being silent. The line went dead. She stood on the patio, phone still against her cheek, watching Cole float lazily in the pool, completely unaware that the scaffolding beneath her career had just cracked. Then her phone buzzed again, an internal message from legal. Subject, per board instruction, access to all strategic repositories, temporarily suspended. She tapped it open, but her corporate VPN login had already timed out. The app froze. For the first time in years, the systems she thought she owned weren't hers. Wednesday, 7:16 a.m. Her phone buzzed once, an innocuous push notification from the firm's mobile app. Session expired. Please log in again. She tapped it without thinking. The login screen blinked red. User access revoked. Contact IT. Her brow furrowed. She tried again. Same result. Okay. Glitch. Probably just a 2-factor hiccup. She tossed the phone onto the bed and reached for her laptop, still warm from last night's check-in with her assistant. She opened the lid. The screen stayed black for a beat longer than normal, then flashed a cold message across the center. Credential not recognized. Device locked. She blinked. That wasn't standard. That wasn't a password issue. That was administrative override. She opened her personal Gmail. Drafted 3 emails, rapid fire. To legal. Experiencing access issues. Please advise, urgent. To HR. Unclear on next steps regarding the compliance call. Need clarity before end of day. To Adrian. We need to talk. Now. She hit send. Then waited. Nothing. The emails didn't bounce. But they didn't get read either. No read receipts. No automated replies. Just silence. Immediate and total. She called her assistant. Voicemail. She texted. 10 minutes later, a message came through. Not from legal. Not from HR. From her assistant's personal number. You may want to call your attorney. Just that. No punctuation. No emoji. The kind of text you send when you know they're watching your keyboard. Her heart began to hammer against her chest. She glanced around the hotel suite, sunlight pouring in. The scent of lavender from the resort candles she'd thought were luxurious 24 hours ago, now suddenly cloying. She dialed Adrian. Straight to voicemail. She texted, "Are you locking me out?" No reply. She tried Cole next. Also voicemail. She called again. And again. 4 times. The 5th time, the call connected, but it was just Cole's lazy, pre-recorded voice. "If this is work, I'm not checking. If this is fun, leave a message." She didn't. Instead, she pulled a hoodie over her swimsuit and stuffed everything she could into the duffel bag. Laptop, toiletries, charger, folder with receipts she now wished she'd burned. She checked out of the resort early, faking a migraine, and called a rideshare to the airport. Her flight wasn't until later that afternoon, but she couldn't stay there. Not when every sunbeam felt like a spotlight. By the time she landed and rushed home, still in yesterday's clothes, she fumbled with her keys like a drunk. Inside, she bolted the door, dropped her bag, and plugged in the corporate laptop. Still locked. Still cold. She tried the VPN again. Denied. She opened her email app on her phone. Logged out. Tried to sign back in. Account suspended. Contact administrator. That phrase. Suspended. Not deactivated. Not paused. Suspended. Meaning, not final. But definitely not temporary either. She sat at the kitchen island, staring at the granite slab they'd picked out 5 years ago during a remodel she'd claimed as her vision project. Her phone sat next to the coffee mug he used every morning, the chipped one with the faded National Park logo. She picked it up, called him, straight to voicemail. Her thumb hovered over the record button, but she couldn't even decide what to say. Sorry. Explain? Beg. She didn't leave a message. She opened her private bank app, thinking maybe she'd wire money to a firm, prep for damage control, hire PR before this got public. 2 of her accounts were inaccessible. The 3rd showed recent administrative contact activity, flagged pending verification. What did he do? What had he prepared for? All the leverage she thought she had, gone. All the exits? Locked. It was like waking up mid-fall, with no idea how long you've been descending. And in the silence of that kitchen, with only the ticking of a wall clock she never liked, she finally felt it. Not guilt. Not even shame. Just a deep, tightening dread, slow and surgical, like the air itself was being stripped away molecule by molecule, and no one was going to save her this time. Wednesday, 9:03 a.m. She was still in yesterday's clothes, slouched on the sofa, when the doorbell rang. It didn't buzz like a friend's knock. It landed with finality, 3 firm hits, each one a nail. Through the peephole, a courier, clipboard in hand, bored face, no curiosity. Just doing his job. She opened the door with numb fingers. "Meredith L?" he asked, already holding out the envelope. She nodded, didn't speak. He handed her the thick packet. No logo on the outside, no return address, just her name in stark typeface and a red sticker marked immediate response requested. He left without another word. She shut the door, locked it, pressed her back to it for a second, as if it might hold her up. She took the envelope to the kitchen, where the coffee machine blinked 12 o'clock because she never reset it. Tore the seal, slid the documents out with hands already shaking. The top page was printed on company letterhead, but not her version of it. Not the crisp, curated brand she'd once overseen as a rising exec. This was from legal. Stark, black ink. Purposeful spacing. It read, "Notice of immediate suspension pending termination review. Date, Wednesday. Subject, violation of Ethics Clause 9C, Silent Equity Clause. Review triggered by verified silent equity stakeholder, M. Fraser Holdings." She stared at the page, not breathing. The next page detailed a full summary of internal review findings. Unreported romantic relationship with subordinate employee, misuse of corporate funds for personal travel, breach of disclosure obligations. Her stock plan, frozen pending ethics review. All unvested shares, subject to clawback. She flipped the page. There it was, her photo. Not from a tabloid. Not a pixelated screenshot. No, it was the one she had posted. She and Cole, champagne raised, sunset blazing behind them, tagged #EarnEdit #retreat vibes. Printed, time-stamped, filed. Beneath it, executive bonus retreat, billing submitted by M.L. She pressed her fingers into her temples, hard, trying to breathe. The document smelled faintly of toner and someone else's hands. It felt invasive, clinical. like her life had been examined under glass and stamped for disposal. The last page wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Just one line. You spent 3 days with your work husband. You lost 16 years of mine. No signature. Just that. Tears didn't come right away. That would have been too human, too relieving. What came first was pressure, behind her eyes, in her throat, in her chest. Then the paper slipped from her fingers. Then the sob hit her so hard it felt like vomiting air. And finally, she collapsed into the kitchen chair, gripped the edge of the table, and wept. Not loud, not cinematic, just raw, broken sound. She cried the way people cry when they realize something isn't just over. It's scorched, salted, unrecoverable. She didn't check her phone, didn't bother calling legal. Because suddenly, for the first time in her career, hell, in her life, there was no version of herself she could perform to fix it. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't stormed out, hadn't posted, hadn't even replied. And somehow, that made it worse. Because what she realized in that moment, between the freeze notice and the handwriting she still recognized, was that he hadn't been quiet out of weakness. He'd been quiet out of preparation. Thursday, 10:01 a.m. In the boardroom she once commanded with laser-etched agendas and color-coded KPI dashboards, 11 leather chairs were filled. One, hers, remained conspicuously empty. Her nameplate had been removed. Not replaced. Just gone. They didn't send her a meeting invite. They didn't even CC her. The agenda header read, Executive Ethics Review, Activation of Clause 9C, Legacy Shareholder Action. Below that, a subpoint in smaller font, Secondary Review, Executive Oversight Failure, CEO Involvement. No one dared say her name aloud. Not at first, but everyone knew. She was a ghost now, a headline waiting to detonate. Legal led the presentation. A precise, brutal walk through timelines, expenditures, emails, and social media posts. A spreadsheet loaded with dates, costs, receipts. Then, without flourish, the triggering submission from M. Fraser Holdings. Dated. Verified. Logged. Silent equity clause was lawfully activated, the General Counsel stated. The Ethics Committee has found sufficient grounds to move forward. The vote now moves to the board. No deliberation. Just hands raised. Her executive title, revoked effective immediately. Her stock bonus package, frozen, pending resolution of clause-triggered breach. Adrian, her old friend, her boss, sat in silence as the second motion was introduced. CEO conduct under review for non-disclosure of interpersonal relationships affecting executive assignments. Another vote. He didn't speak in his defense. He didn't need to. The board had seen the emails, the ones where he approved Meredith's retreat reimbursement without routing it through compliance. The late-night replies with winking emojis. The way he'd called her a trusted consigliera in an off-the-record conversation with a major client. All of it came back. All of it now had weight. He was suspended pending investigation. They gave him until noon to pack his things. At 12:31 p.m., the firm issued a brief press statement on their investor portal. Just 113 words. Following a review prompted by a legacy equity clause, the board of directors has approved a leadership transition effective immediately. We are committed to upholding the highest standards of ethical and professional conduct across all levels of our organization. No names, no drama. But by 1:07 p.m., an internal memo was leaked. Her name was in the subject line. Her face hit social media by 2:15, cropped from her own posts, overlaid with phrases like code of conduct breach and corporate ethics failure. A screenshot of the resort receipt hit a Reddit thread titled, When Girlbossing Goes Nuclear. Then came the Twitter thread from a junior employee. We were told to emulate her. Turns out we should have been watching the janitor. By evening, her name was trending nationally, for all the wrong reasons. A meme surfaced, her face beside a quote, earned every minute. Underneath, a caption, guess who else earned it? Legal. She saw it from her couch, huddled in the dark, phone in hand. Notifications exploding, DMs flooding in, some cruel, some gleeful, a few hollowly sympathetic. No calls from Adrian. No calls from Cole. Not even her assistant. Only a system-wide notification she wasn't supposed to receive anymore, still echoing through her old inbox. Access permanently removed from shared drives. A simple sentence. No warmth. No explanation. Just the administrative death of everything she'd built. She wasn't just suspended. She was already being erased. Friday, 7:42 a.m. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet for someone whose phone had been vibrating every hour for 3 straight days. Meredith lay in bed staring at the ceiling, eyes wide, makeup from 2 days ago faintly smudged around the edges. She hadn't bothered to wash her face. What would be the point? There was no camera left to face, no boardroom to enter, no inbox to return to. Then the phone rang. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen in weeks. CEO Mark R. Not Adrian. Mark. The real CEO. The one above her boss. The one who rarely stepped into daily operations but controlled every true lever of power behind the curtain. She hesitated, then swiped to answer. Hello. What did you do? His voice detonated through the speaker. Every syllable cracked like glass under weight. The board, he continued. They got an email from him. From M. Fraser Holdings. With evidence. With timestamps. With clause references from a contract you never disclosed. She couldn't even breathe. You understand what you've done? He shouted. You activated a silent equity clause we didn't even know still existed. And now we're exposed. Ethically, financially, and legally. Because you were too arrogant to check who still held a knife at our neck. Her voice barely came out. It was just a trip. Silence. The kind of silence that chills you more than screams. Then, with an icy calm that somehow hit harder than the yelling, he hissed. This isn't about a trip. This is about who still owned a piece of this company. And who you mocked. Publicly. While he held the fuse. Click. The line went dead. She sat in her bed, still holding the phone, the screen slowly dimming. Her face was reflected in the black mirror, drawn, hollow, ruined. Not by scandal. Not by mistake. By precision. He had waited 16 years. And then, in 5 days, he had turned everything to ash. With no lawyers, no fights, no spectacle. Just execution. The headlines weren't hers anymore. The boardrooms weren't hers. Her work husband had gone completely silent, likely on his lawyer's advice. The firm had scrubbed her profile from the website. Even the LinkedIn banner she once bragged about designing had been replaced. She put the phone down, stood up slowly. Her knees almost gave. She walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and caught another glimpse of herself in the mirror. No power, no plan, just the echo of a woman who thought the story revolved around her. Across town, in a modest kitchen with a view of nothing but old trees and birdsong, he poured coffee into the same chipped mug he'd used every morning for years. He stirred in 2 sugars, sat at the table, and opened a hardcover book. Turned the page. Didn't check the news. Didn't check his phone. Didn't need to. Because the point was never noise. It was silence. And now, finally, she understood the weight of it.